Yep.
I bought you one of those, and I've got one for Toby Dow.
Yep, they're great.
It's like a wrap. You put it around yourself, and it
It's a
blocks out your eyes.
It's a blindfold.
It's a blindfold.
But built-in,
Yeah.
wireless, Bluetooth
Yep.
speakers.
Yeah, so what I do is I lie down and I choose my favourite podcast and I put the sleep button on.
Yeah.
So then when I wake up, there's no light that wakes me up. I've got the wrap on, and the show that has got me absolutely
Hooked.
absorbed is Bronwyn. It's called Bronwyn. Hedley Thomas. We've had Hedley on the program, but this is a big one. This is a big one, Brian, because we are about to be joined by a young lady who is very, very close to this situation. Madi Walsh joins the run home with Joel and Fletch. Hello, Madi.
Hi, how are you guys?
Going good, Madi.
Madi is a young student who is studying forensics. Is that right, Madi?
Yes. I actually just recently graduated. So
Congratulations. So
Congratulations.
for us and our listeners, what do you want to get into? So you've now got a degree. What sort of forensic science do you want to best use your abilities?
Well, I majored in crime scene investigation, so that's definitely my goal,
Yep.
to be on the front line on the crime scene. I guess I'll have to take every opportunity as it comes to get there because it is a bit of a progress. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just taking everything as it comes.
So is it hard to get into that space, is it?
Very hard. Yeah, there's not a lot of opportunities to become a crime scene investigator because, well, yeah, it's a very scarce field. There's just not many. There's not many places. I mean, I could go into the labs and work in the labs, but I really want to be on the front lines.
On the front line, yeah.
So, Madi, before we reveal why you're so connected to this case, like Brian and I, and most of our listeners, we love the true crime stuff. You're only a young lady and you've just graduated, but clearly there would have been a penchant for certain shows, true crime shows, or was there something you went, I love this show, I want to do this?
Well, I'm actually very similar to you in that case, that I listen to true crime to go to sleep every single
Do
night.
ya?
I can't sleep without it. Yeah, I have for years and years. I've always loved it. I've always had a keen interest in it. And yeah, it's something that's always intrigued me.
Have you got the wrap that I was talking about? Can I send you one?
Yes, I have one of those actually.
Yes.
I've had for years. Yeah, they're so good. I love it.
Okay, now let's cut to the chase. So Madi, we're talking about Bronwyn, which is a absolute knockout of the park podcast.
Could you give us the bullet points, Madi, on Bronwyn first of all?
No. Before we do that, Brian.
Oh, you want to?
No, I want to really take the layer off the onion, so to speak, Brian.
All right.
And before we get into that, because Madi's got all the bullet points.
Okay.
But why are you so enamoured and fixated with this particular case, Madi? Tell us why.
So growing up, I heard all about Bronwyn's disappearance because Bronwyn is my second cousin. So she's been missing for 31 years now. I'm only 21. So for the past 21 years, she has been the topic of discussion at family events because everyone's always had more questions than answers. And that's always been such a interesting thing for me because it's not normal that you have someone missing and supposedly murdered in the family.
And is that what you think's happened to Bronwyn? Is that what the family feels has happened?
Yeah, the family has felt right from the get-go that she found herself with foul play, and foul play did occur. That's what they've always stood by. However, unfortunately, that has never been confirmed.
Have you found yourself investigating, Madi?
Yes, I have, especially with this case. I mean, growing up, I didn't know all that much about it because I think they kind of kept me out of it being so young.
Yeah.
But as I got older, I asked more questions, and only recently, last year, did I actually get access to all the case information, which blew me away.
Right. And can I ask you this? Was there any as I suppose now you're looking back on it, was there any issues with the police back then? Was anything being reported, like domestic violence or anything like that, or was it just totally out of the blue, her disappearance?
So Bronwyn had separated from her husband, John Winfield, in March of 1993. In May of 1993, she went missing. She was reported to the police, missing to the police 11 days after she originally went missing. And the police just wrote it off as she ran away. They did no formal investigation, no witness statements, no forensic investigation, and that was it. Nothing else happened after that until 5 years later was it reopened and reinvestigated. And that's when there was finally formal witness statements and finally some movement within the case.
So it sounds eerily similar to Teacher's Pet.
Teacher's Pet.
But is that a fault of the police, or was that just not the thing to do back then in the 90s? Did we not have access to the forensics, or was it just bad police work?
I will honestly say it's bad police work. There were lots of catalysts and lots of reasons that this should have been investigated from the get-go. They had all the evidence there. They had everything they could ever need right in front of them. They had people they could talk to. They had a mother that has two young girls that just disappeared out of the blue. It wasn't something that she would have ever done. It's not something that was ever she told anyone about. It was very much something that should have been an important focus for the police. However, unfortunately, it was not.
Chatting with Madi Walsh, now, who's a relative of Bronwyn Winfield. The podcast is called Bronwyn. And, well, if you catch up on 10% of that, you'll understand the story we're talking about. Madi, like Brian shared with us, the story around the Teacher's Pet. Does the family of Bronwyn, yourself included, do you harbour sort of hopes around this podcast coming out? And is there avenues for your family to get some kind of resolution as well?
Yeah, so the Teacher's Pet is what caused my family and a lot of Bronwyn's close friends to actually reach out to Headley and say that they know someone that disappeared under very similar circumstances, just out of the blue, and had young kids and was a devoted mother. And Headley found interest in it, and we're so grateful for that, because this is the closest we've ever been to answers ever. And yeah, it's also motivating that in the Teacher's Pet, they never found Lynn's body, unfortunately, but they were still able to convict someone. So the fact that it could be a similar situation with us, we're very hopeful that we could finally have an answer.
So, Maddie, there was a case in the US, one of the first it's actually the first podcast I ever listened to, called Serial. It was over there in the United States. You may be familiar with it if you love your true crime. But it had major ramifications when it comes to the court and retesting a person, which is almost the reverse. It was somebody who was already incarcerated, and then they got the retrial. But what you're saying there, which I'm reading between the lines, is without the Teacher's Pet, then this story of Bronwyn would not have found the surface. Is that true?
Yes, very
Wow.
much so. I really don't think it would have ever been reinvestigated or looked into by the police ever again if it wasn't for the Teacher's Pet.
Wow.
Maddie, the coronial inquest in 2002, they said a known person should be charged. Just tell us a little bit about the coronial inquest. Do they not have power to then say, all right, this person, a known person, should be charged? Are they sort of a third party and they don't have any, like, why have a coronial inquest and they come up with a known person should be charged and they don't do anything about it?
So with the coronial inquest, it happened over 5 days, and all those 5 days, witnesses went into the witness box and said what they remember, recounted everything they know, and at the end of those 5 days, the Deputy State Coroner, who at the time was Karl Milivanovic, he said that the evidence is beyond capable of satisfying a jury beyond reasonable doubt that a known
Okay.
person has committed an offence.
Gotcha.
However, this then gets sent on to the Director of Public Prosecutions, and it's up to the DPP to then decide whether this should go to trial and be presented in front of a jury. Unfortunately, the DPP decided that there was not a substantial amount of evidence to go to trial. So that was basically where it ended.
Wow.
And I know Bronwyn's children, they're a bit older now. Are they, and I don't want to spoil it, but do they come into this podcast?
How old are they, by the way,
They're
Maddie?
40s, aren't they?
Yeah, 40s, late 30s, yeah.
Do they come into the podcast? Did Headley and yourself interview them at all?
It's very difficult because they are so close to this case, and it's such a touchy subject. I'm only in contact with one of her daughters out of her two biological daughters, and she didn't want any part in this podcast because she doesn't want to lose her relationship she has with her sisters, who are very close to their dad.
Okay.
So John Winfield, who is possibly responsible. And she just would love answers but doesn't want involvement, and I understand that it's a very difficult thing to have to deal with, especially losing your mum at such a young age and never finding any answers.
Gee, that is a tough scenario, Brian.
And so at the end of the day, the police just say there's not enough evidence, so we don't want to spend taxpayers' money. Is that the excuse they give?
Yeah, usually it's, oh, there's not enough. We'll wait until something new comes about and then we'll start reinvestigating. Oh, we don't know, Yeah, it's very much other things take priority. I think a very common thing with missing people is when you're missing, you're missing. The police are only mostly, in cases that I'm aware of, they only really care if there's still a chance you're alive. And then once that it kind of goes beyond that period where you're probably no longer alive, they tend to lose interest and they tend to focus on other things instead. So it's difficult because there are so many families out there that have missing relatives, and yet the police don't really do anything about it.
Matty, was there any note left? Was there a bag packed? Was there any sort of I suppose, clues as where she may have gone if she went on her own free will?
No. So her husband, who she was separated from, said that she needed a break for a few days and she just walked out of the house and apparently got into someone's car and that car drove away. However, her husband cannot remember, did not see the car, did not see who picked her up, and did not see if she took anything. It's also important to note that she had recently just moved back into the family house after being out of the house for about 2 months or so. And she moved back in because her husband was working in Sydney at the time as he was a bricklayer and there was more work.
Sorry, Maddie, didn't move back to get the marriage back together, not necessarily.
No. So her husband had moved to Sydney. Well, she was separated from him. He had moved to Sydney because he had more work there and the house was empty, and she had got advice from a solicitor, and the solicitor said, you can move back in since you also own that house.
Yeah.
And she had 2 kids with her, and so she moved back in and he flew up and went to the house, and on that night she was never seen again.
Chatting to Madi Walsh, a relative of Bronwyn Winfield, who the big podcast at the moment is Bronwyn. Headley Thomas, who's been on the show before. If you're familiar with True Crime Tuesday, you may have heard Headley before, the teacher's pet and so forth. But, Brian, it's a massive story, isn't it?
It's huge. So can I just, what I'm trying to understand, when she moved out, when she had separated from her husband, John, were the girls with her, her children with her?
Yeah, the girls were in her custody. So John was mainly working in Sydney and she was up in Lennox Head with the girls. So she was taking them to school. She had the family car. and she was living in a flat a couple streets away from where she used to live, except she struggled to make ends meet because she only had a part-time job and she wasn't getting any money from John. So on the advice of her solicitor, he told her that she could move back in because she also owned that house. So she had every right to, and John wasn't staying at that house at that time.
So was divorce proceedings looking likely?
Yes.
Yes.
So she had regular contact with the solicitor and they were working out what her assets were, custody agreements, and it was progressing towards a divorce. She did not see any hope of reconciliation. She did not want any reconciliation. For her, that relationship was done.
You can just imagine, like, regardless of what the truth is, if we ever learn the truth, we'll never know. But, well, maybe we'll know. But I understand John Winfield is still living up in the Lennox Head region. Now, can you just imagine after this podcast and the enormity of this podcast and the
Yes.
groundswell of this podcast?
But the locals would.
Oh, do you have any family still living up there, Maddie?
No, I don't, except for John and his two daughters. Two of them live up there, Jodie and Lauren. However, they're not blood related to me. Well, Lauren is the only one that's blood related to me. However, I've never really had any contact with her. So no, I don't have any other family up there.
And has Headley ever asked John to be interviewed for the podcast or yourself?
Yeah, so we actually together we went and dropped a letter into his letterbox. We tried knocking on the door to talk to him, however, he didn't answer. We left a letter and we basically said that this was before the podcast came out, that we would be releasing a podcast and his name would be mentioned, and if he wants to come forward and have an interview, say his side of the story, then we will be more than willing to talk to him. However, he just irrevocably claims innocence and says he had nothing to do with Bronwyn's disappearance and stands by his initial statement that he did in 1998.
Maddie, by the way, you've conducted yourself magnificently well, so you're going to have a great future in what you're trying to do in the world of forensics and so forth. I just want to ask you one last thing is everything's alleged, right? So
Yes.
everything we've spoken about is alleged. But in your own mind, and you are somebody who's very studious around forensics and the legal system, etc., in your own mind, are you very confident in thinking or knowing who may have caused such situation?
So from all the depth of investigation I've done in this case, or looking at all the evidence, I can surmise that there is only really one person that could be responsible for Bronwyn's disappearance and her alleged murder. I do believe that, as the coroner did say, that she is dead and that a known person should in fact be charged. I have only ever come across one suspect in this case. There's not a case of there was someone else. That was ruled out very, very early on. So I do believe that there is a good chance this case could be solved or someone could be charged and justice could be had for Bronwyn.
Maddie, we'd love to get you back on. Madi Walsh, the Australian newspaper. It's a big story. Bronwyn, you can catch up on that. BronwynPodcast.com. Maddie, we'll catch you next time.
Thanks,
well
Maddie.
played, young lady.
Thank you.
Thank you.